Okay, we'll try this. I'm not sure how the sound is going to be. Um, One of my subscribers, Sharon Massey, asked me to talk about my my childhood, which the majority of which took place in India, in the Himalayas, and she was asking me what it was like. Now, it's a kind of an interesting question because, like, it could be difficult for me to articulate what it was like because I don't know what it was not like. Like, I'm very, very close to it, so it's quite hard for me to be objective. So I'm going to probably describe it subjectively, um, not having been raised in, you know, a household that wasn't like spiritual and Indian centric. So my earliest memories are actually of the valley where I grew up in the Himalayas, and there's this community of people who were studying with a guru, studying about meditation and the philosophy of oneness. And and for me as a kid, like um, one of the things that I remember most strongly from that time is the way there were steps into the mountains made out of rock that was, I think it was some kind of like um, mica, or there's this rock in the Himalayas that looks like silver paper, and I think it's not mica because it's a little bit stronger. Anyway, that there would be slabs of these rocks sticking out of the mountain like teeth, and then forming steps. And so when you were probably the reason I remember this is because they were quite hard to get over when I was 2.5 years old, and my mom would be like, "Come on, Aaron, you can do it." Um, yeah, so it's interesting because I'm constantly experiencing some sort of spiritual nostalgia in my life, which harkens back to that time of when I was like, this would have been in 79 or 1980, which would have been it was our first, it was my first trip to India, but it was also kind of my first memories of anything in my life. And so they became very formative. So then when we went back to Canada, my dad was working for the government, and my mom too, actually. Um, that was more the culture shock that I experienced was coming from India, which formed me, and then um, experiencing kindergarten in Canada, and um, and there were a lot of sort of cultural differences between me and the other kids as well because I was vegetarian and I wasn't just vegetarian like oh, my parents raised me vegetarian. Like people often say to me, "Oh, you were indoctrinated," and it's a little bit strange. And, it could be true, but for me as a kid, I actually experienced a kind of horror of people who ate meat, which was, not a judgment, but I did. When we would visit other households where meat was served, I would be kind of scared of the food. It smelled very strange, and it didn't smell like food to me. And also, I was slightly scared of the people who ate it. Bear in mind that I'm like 4 years old at this point, and my first trip to India was when I was 2. And then, the other thing is my experience of the smell of incense because the community that we lived in India was pretty much permeated by the smell of incense. And I think there's like this sort of not compound, but there's a flavor of incense which uses vanilla and something else with it, which is very woodsy. So like the base note, I guess, is vanilla, and then there's kind of high note something else, and in it that there's something that smells like cedar berries, um, which I suspect is not, but it's something coniferous. Anyway, the smell is very ancient, and it smells like your past lives are calling you. At least that's how it felt to me. I don't think that I articulated it like that. Like I wasn't thinking, "Oh, this is my past life," but I was feeling some kind of deja vu every time I smelt it, and it was a very strange experience because it was both comforting and unsettling. Not unsettling. It was like mysterious. So it was like comforting and mysterious at the same time. And and when we were in Canada, and we would go to other meditators or people from who had also been to the same place in India, they would be burning that incense which they had brought back. And as soon as we would walk into the room, into the house, I would feel this sense of reassurance. As soon as I smelled the incense, this kind of sense memory would kick in, and I would be like, oh, we're safe. And also something exciting. Like, it was kind of like this environment which felt safe and exciting at the same time. And it was quite like the point of the institute in the Himalayas in India was meditation. Like everyone was supposed to expected to meditate. Um, it wasn't mandated, but it was very much the focus. And then the other focus was what we call the space, which was basically, you could compare it to an idea like God or an idea like oneness, but it was the underlying reality underneath everything in the world and the universe, which is supposed to be consciousness, pure consciousness. So, like, forget about energy, forget about matter. Those were both symptoms of consciousness. And now, it was quite some years before I thought about the philosophy that my parents were studying, and I was, by proxy studying in any kind of objective way. And and it was not probably until I was 10 years old that I tried meditating myself. Um, I was a bedwetter for years and years and years, and much to the shame of my mother, I couldn't really go for sleepovers without a whole negotiation process in Canada. And my mom hired a psychologist or psychotherapist to come and talk to me about what happened when I was going to sleep. And we had this long interview during which I talked a lot because I was very precocious. And then I did not like the psychologist because she banished me to the other room so that she could talk to my parents privately, which I thought was discriminatory at the time. I mean, now that I know a bit about psychology, I understand why they interview people separately, but I was offended. And then at the end of this whole process, she asked so many things, and then she described the process of going to sleep in such detail. Her solution was that my parents should purchase a device. It was electroshock therapy, basically. There's some kind of gizmo that when it becomes wet, it zaps you. So she was recommending that they put this in my bed. And I mean, my mom, who was like a great believer in psychotherapy and psychology and psychiatry, was not impressed with that solution, and I think my father was quite furious, actually. Anyway, so by this time, I had developed like an avid love of fantasy and magic, and even paganism at that age, and my dad talked to me, and he said, "Look, you believe in magic, like, why do you not try to hypnotize yourself using meditation before you go to sleep? 5 minutes. what can you lose really by trying it? And and so I did, and I had no belief in it whatsoever. I was like, the only thing, like, I think Abraham Hicks would would object to me saying that I had no belief in it, but I think what I did was I suspended my disbelief. I just put the doubt to the side, and then I tried it in this sort of as open-minded as I could be about it at the time, and did a visualization and imagined myself um, wanting to pee in my bed, and then and then stopping it and getting up and going to the bathroom. And it was interesting because that night I didn't wet the bed, and then I kept up this practice. And then it was interesting. The other thing that I observed was that when when I would meditate for 5 minutes, I had the urge to meditate in the day also. And then I think there was one day when I was meditating, and my mom was like, "We're just going to meditate for 5 minutes before we go out." And I don't know why we didn't do it together, but I was in my room and she was in her room, and I transcended. Now, I don't quite know how to describe what that means, but it was like the concentration became very steady, and then it was like the concentration was carrying me instead of me trying to do it. Um, is the best way that I can describe it. Anyway, I was like, wow, you can really do stuff in your own mind to affect your mood, which is incredibly powerful. Um, so I was very impressed by that, and I also observed that the act of will kind of gets in the way. Like if you're trying to transcend, it makes it harder to do. But it took me a long time to figure out how to let go. I think when we were in Costa Rica, we went for a vacation. I just decided to flip my approach to meditation. I'm not quite sure what inspired me, but I decided I'm not going to like try to meditate. I'm just going to close my eyes and let go and see what happens. And I'm just going to like listen to birds and feel the wind and see what happens. And that also, I transcended very quickly that time, but it was also like the first time before my mind had tried to make a formula out of it and tried to make something that I could do. As soon as like your mind and ego comes to try and like copyright the process, it blocks it again. So you have to keep releasing it, keep releasing it, keep releasing it. Anyway, and then I'm going to tell you a story about my guru. So we went back to India after some years, and I I had pernicious doubt about meditation and the spiritual process, even though I was in it. Um, and I used to ask my parents like really aggravating, I'm sure, to them questions about meditation, and finally they said just ask our guru. So I did, and I said to him like I was asking about the observer, because when you're meditating you're supposed to focus on the observer, which is a kind of form of it's a formless um, entity, I guess you could say. It's not really an entity, but like by observing who is observing and who's observing that and who's observing that, you come to the formless reality, which is the space. So I asked my guru, I said, like, when I'm meditating, I often find that I'm picturing, when you talk about the observer, or I try to observe the observer, I'm picturing a face looking out at the space. So it's like this dualistic thing that I'm concocting. And how can I get around that? And he was like, no, that's fine. That's the observer. And I was like, no, but it can't be, because it's supposed to be like one reality. And he was like, well, if you know that, then you know who the observer is. Like, well, why are you asking? If you know what it is, why don't you tell me what it is? And then I was like, oh, it kind of like it took me out of. It's interesting how the ego works. Like the ego will try to make you so small that you can't progress, and then but it's actually using the infinite power to make you small. And anyway, this is getting very esoteric, but yes. So basically, growing up in the Himalayas, there's for me to say what it was like. It was like a combination of this sort of nostalgic feeling. Even when I was a child, I was nostalgic for something else that I was trying to get back to, and and I'm not really sure what that was, but I used to feel it like in the mountains, or when I would smell incense, or when I would see carvings on the Hindu, you could call them Hindus, a kind of Himalayan tribal temples. Um, I would feel this kind of yearning for something ancient. And so there's that. And then there's the philosophy, which was about the philosophy of oneness and the study of consciousness. And, and yeah, it was, I think it was kind of wonderful. Like, I was also, you know, there's this huge community of people from all over the world. So I was kind of raised by people with very diverse ideas about the world and philosophy, and lots of people and experts in different fields. And it was it was a bit like I didn't have this. I think a lot of kids who grow up, even in sort of safe countries like Canada, have this feeling of danger. The neighbor might be a molester, or your teacher might be sadistic, or and I also don't know, but I did feel scared of my teachers when I was in Canada going to school. Um, I didn't really know what they wanted from me. Um, anyway, so yeah, I felt very cradled by the community, because it was sort of like you had acceptance, especially as a child. I think, I was probably a little bit spoiled in the sense that there was this um, acceptance, and as soon as you would talk to anyone, they would sort of, and it wasn't like, oh, I accept you. It wasn't like one of those new age things. It was just something that you felt when you talked to them. Anyway, so anyway, Sharon, thank you for the question, and I'm going to dedicate this video to you. I don't know if I was able to paint the picture very accurately. I kind of just did like anecdata, but that's sort of the best I can do. You know, um, not kind of coming to it like I think a lot of the people who were there, they had much more of a sense of it objectively, the grown-ups, because they made a choice to move to the Himalayas and study with this guru and study the philosophy of oneness, and um, so they were coming to it from a different training, a different kind of indoctrination. Whereas for me, it was just everything that I knew was very normal. What, people don't meditate? Um, but I remember actually my parents had given me such a lecture about other kids in Canada don't know about these things, that I was really surprised when another kid in school asked me if I believed in God, because I thought they didn't know about God. I thought that the word God actually only applied to our tradition, which my grandparents would be horrified to know because they were Christian. Anyway, so those are my early memories. And yeah, lots of love to you, Sharon, and thank you for the question. I'm going to leave it there because I can really ramble. Okay, bye for now.